Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the 5th of January. Today is in fact remembered and marked as a day when we observe the right to self-determination for the Kashmiris living in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And as we all know that the demand perhaps was about the free, fair and transparent plebiscite that should be held in Kashmir so that people can use the right to self-determination, whether they want to be a part of Kashmir or India or Pakistan. Now, this is perhaps one of the most, I would say, outstanding issues in the United Nations. Nothing has been done so far. When we talk about the miseries of the people of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, there is a long list. They have gone through a lot. It is believed that around 100,000 people so far have been killed for this struggle for freedom. Now, another very important aspect is that when you talk about the Indian mindset, you can well imagine that around 1 million Indian forces are deployed in Kashmir. 1 million. So that means that for every family there is a soldier. This is, I think, one of the worst open jails in the world, where there is no right to the people, especially to the Muslims. When you talk about the demographic changes that have been made there, it's unbelievable. Around 45 lakh domiciles have been distributed so that the demographics could be changed. And at some stage, if there is a plebiscite, obviously the result is going to be the Indian favor. But as far as the overall, I would say, momentum regarding this particular phase is concerned, it's really important, especially post 2019, August 5th, when Article 370 was abrogated and the right of these Kashmiris, or the special rights perhaps, they were snatched away. The special status was taken away from the Kashmiris, and ever since then the problem has started. If you look at the last week or so, at least 15 Kashmiri youth were brutally killed by the Indian trigger-happy forces, as I always say. These were the youngsters who were picked up on various charges and eventually they were killed, and that is what we call the extrajudicial killing. Many have been kidnapped, many have been sent to various jails, but this is what the reality is. So we'll be talking about the Indian war crimes. We'll be also throwing light on the Indian state terrorism, Indian sponsored also. And then as we say that Pakistan, since we always support the Kashmiri brothers and we believe that the moral support, the diplomatic support and the political support should always be there. But what else is needed now? That is a $1 million question. Times have changed, things have changed, economies have changed, alignments have changed. Now what? This is going to be today's topic, but before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
Determination Day. On this day in 1949, United Nations of control in all over the world are observing January 5th as Right to Self-Determination Day. On this day in 1949, United Nations Commission for India and Pakistan adopted a resolution that guaranteed Kashmiris right to self-determination through an impartial plebiscite, a promise that remains unfulfilled even after 73 years. The day is also a moment of reckoning for the United Nations to assess its own success on making the member states to act upon and implementing the resolutions it has passed. Pakistan today is observing the Kashmir Solidarity Day to express its unflinching support towards the under vicious military siege people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The day was marked by activities such as rallies, seminars, and conferences across the world intending to garner international community's attention towards the disdainful and contravening attitude of India towards United Nations Security Council resolutions and international humanitarian law in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Prime Minister Imran Khan, in one of his tweets, reminded the United Nations Security Council of its unfulfilled commitment regarding the promised plebiscite in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Prime Minister called the United Nations attention towards the Hindutva-inspired Modi regime's egregious violations of international humanitarian law and growing scale of war crimes in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and pleaded the United Nations to take notice of these atrocities.
Well, to talk about it, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Dr. Professor Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Sahab, expert on foreign affairs and international relations. Dr. Saad, thank you so much for your time, sir. And we also have with us on Skype Dr. Rizwana Abbasi Sahiba. She's the head of Department International Relations at NUML University. Dr. Sahiba, pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll also be joined in by Major General retired Saad Khattak Sahab, who is again a senior analyst, and he'll be joining us in a little while. But let me put the first question to you, Dr. Saab. It's been so many years now, almost I would say 3/4 of a century, sir, one of the oldest pending cases in the United Nations, and nothing has been done. Now, one thing is for sure, since the Indians took this issue to the United Nations, and the Kashmiris perhaps were assured that a free, fair and transparent plebiscite would be held. But sir, it's been over 75 years now. Nothing has been done, demographic changes have been made, and the special status of the Kashmiris, it has been snatched away through the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. Now sir, looking at the current situation, in most of the cases, sir, even you won't find many stories about Kashmir when you talk about the international television. Do you think, sir, the old method that was being used perhaps during the last, say, 6-7 decades, is it a useful formula? Or you think that the nature of the cause would remain the same, but perhaps the action should be a little different now?
Look, we have to take into account two things. You are tracing this problem from 1947, but we have to not forget the Kashmiri struggle against the, you can say, dictatorial or these kind of the things started way back in 1931 in a very organized fashion. So the struggle started there, so it is almost a century old. So why I am referring to it, the reason is very clear that in the last 100 years, everyone has failed to control or you can say pacify the resilience of the Kashmiris for the right of self-determination. Now coming to the 1947, and in 1948 we had a war, and then in 1949 India went to the United Nations Security Council, as you very rightly pointed out. United Nations Security Council assured Indians, and Pakistan was the party, that the plebiscite will held, and Indians agreed over it. Pakistan said, let's say if the United Nations Security as a responsible state, we agreed with it, and Kashmiris were equally satisfied with the plebiscite. Now after that, the things started evolving, and in the mid-1950s, Nehru deviated from his own promise to the international community, promise to the Kashmiris, promise to his own people, promise to the region. Why I'm saying all these things? Because after that the crisis started, and South Asia is suffering from that denial right to the Kashmiris. Then coming towards the modern time, I think if you see South Asia, especially subcontinent, it has all the resources. We can be a very rich region, Pakistan, India or the other states, but there is a curse of the God. Why we are suffering from poverty, from all these kind of things? Because of the denial of a million people's right, killing. So if you see the butchering of the Kashmiris is now, you are seeing what is happening in India. So there is some nature as its own benchmark. But now in the last, let's say I can put it in the last 3.5 decades, since mid-80s, Kashmiris movement have taken a different shape. They stood up, and when the Indians, if you see up to the 80s, movement started, Indians tried to give them, but in the 80s, 90s onward, Kashmiris realized that every time when the Indian or Delhi promised us through their pro-Kashmiri leaders, daily pro leaders, we moved ahead. Peace started. But from the mid-80s or early 90s to date, Delhi failed. Delhi has changed different. They changed the policy of dialogue, giving a special status, engaging the Kashmiri leadership. They realized that military muscle is the only answer. So since last 3 decades, we have been witnessing the genocide in Kashmir. But if you see, the movement has moved from the older generation into the new generation. And now, who are the leaders? Who are the, you can say trendsetters? Burhan in the 2016 Dar. So the youngsters early in 20s, they are now writing the movement or leading the freedom movement by paying their own blood. So that's why in your own report you said for every family or for every 4 Kashmiris there is a one soldier with a gun, properly in a fatigue uniform. So by this way they are failing.
Supported by all the draconian laws.
All the draconian, everything. Now my second point here is, where is international community's conscience? We were hearing that the values will be back with the Biden coming into power. Unfortunately, nothing is happening on Kashmir. That makes, and it is a big question mark with our Prime, that if the Kashmiris' rights are denied, if the Palestinian rights are denied, South Sudanese rights were given, East Timorese rights were given, then why their rights are denied? Why they are? Because they are Muslims? If this is the point, if they are Muslims and this American-led West or the international community is silent, then indirectly they are nurturing the notion for a, what we find it everywhere. These
Dr. Sahab, if you believe that the Kashmiris were not Muslims, they were Christians or perhaps they belonged to some other religion, you think this issue would have been in the forefront of the UN and perhaps they would have been able to come up with some sort of a solution?
As a student of international relations, I think that we have to not go for a biases or these things. But as a student of international history, I can say yes. Because if you see South Sudan recent history in 2011, that why South Sudanese were not Muslims. They wanted to break the Muslim Afro-Arab biggest state. There their conscience was there. There they make this, you can say, Omar Bashir, this International Court of Justice said that he committed a crime against humanity. Why there is no such a movement by any journalist or any lawyer in the West against the Modi? It's not a crime against humanity.
Absolutely.
It's since 5th August 2019. It's a prison. People cannot even smell. They cannot even get a breeze. What is happening? And then demographic change. Are the international rules permitted? The violation of a, you can say, though Pakistan and we do not accept the 370 article, but 35A article, the violation or you can say repeal or revoking of these articles is a violation of the Indian Supreme Court verdicts. It's a violation of the Indian
no unilateral decision.
It's a violation of United Nations. Where is world? So my understanding is that this apathetic approach of the international community, particularly towards the Kashmiris, is not a sign of that we are living in a very civilized world.
So bias of the West perhaps is the major reason. Now coming to you, Dr. Rizwana. Now obviously when we talk about the Kashmir issue, there are so many angles to it, and we always talk about the right to self-determination, we talk about the right for the plebiscite, we also talk about human rights issues. I mean, there's a long list of the atrocities going on in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but looking at the current date, 5th of January 2022. Now, we do understand the current situation is very different as it was, let's say, 20, 25 years ago. Things have changed. The command is, with the youth of Kashmir. And I would say hats off to them, the way they are in fact resisting against the Indian military. But ma'am, one important point, and that is about the overall situation. You know, when we talk about the international community, ma'am, we hardly hear anything coming from the right quarters, where people could get some sort of relief that at least somebody is there to support them for this legitimate cause, for this homegrown indigenous movement. Now, looking at the current situation, ma'am, when you talk about the Kashmiri leaders, you talk about Hurriyat, you talk about so many other factors, ma'am, they have been portrayed as if they are the demons, as if these people are not the freedom fighters, they are the terrorists. I mean, this swapping of the ideology, ma'am, is perhaps the major reason. You know, whenever we talk about certain individuals, for us, perhaps they are the freedom fighters, but the way the Indians look at them and the way they in fact show them on media, that's the other way around. Is that causing the problem, ma'am? That narrative has changed, so things on ground have changed as well?
Yes, thank you so much, Faisal, for on this particular. As we all know, January is the 10th day for Kashmir. Why? Because the Kashmir is the issue and the question of international law. When we talk about international law, we talk about the community, talk about the global institutions that govern the global rules. So on this particular day, people of Kashmir are particularly trying to draw international communities, commitments to their legal responsibilities, universal commitments to, legal responsibilities. Number two, freedom movement that you highlighted from the outset had been hijacked and had been portrayed by India through consistent, forceful efforts. This is not a freedom movement, but they have actually aligned this freedom movement to terrorism. More significantly, we need to understand that when the question comes to the self-determination is the right that belongs to collectivities known as people, and by virtue of that right, people of any particular country, particular Kashmir, can freely determine their political status. They can pursue their economic, social, and
sorry to cut you here. Dr. Rizwana, your voice is breaking up, so we'll just try to fix that issue. Meanwhile, I'll just go to General Saab now. General Khattak, welcome to the show, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Since we're talking about this very important date that is related to the right to the self-determination of people living in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, sir, ever since the status has been changed, the demographics have been changed, Article 370 has been revoked, along with 35A, the special status has been snatched away. Things are very miserable for the people living out there, especially for the Muslims and those who still believe that we need to fight back and we need to retaliate against this huge military build-up that's there, about 1 million soldiers. Just imagine, they are deputed there, deployed there with all the authority, they cannot be challenged, and they are trigger happy, and whatever has been done so far, there is no justice. So don't you think, sir, when we say that justice delayed is justice denied, so plebiscite delayed is plebiscite denied, sir? What is your take on that?
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Zafar has very aptly elaborated on the entire perspective of the issue. I would tend to agree with that when there was justice delivered to East Timor, when there was justice delivered to South Sudan, Kosovo, all happened in last about 1 decade or so. Why Kashmir? I think Kashmir or Kashmiri people have been a victim of geography, a victim of clashing great power interests in this region. Unfortunately, a situation in Afghanistan, because of which India has benefited from the engagement of international players in Afghanistan as well as Pakistan's engagement in Afghanistan. So they benefited from that and did whatever that they could do in Kashmir. And the international community, looked the other way because of their obviously their interests with India against the rising China and, of course, the resurgent Russia in the region, because of which the Kashmiri people have suffered to a great deal and continues to suffer. So the point is that there is no hope on the horizon as well that one can say that there would be a plebiscite opportunity given to the Kashmiri people, but that not happening. Tang Ahmad, Bajang Ahmad, the people of Kashmir have picked up arms. They continue and they will continue. I think there is no reason or there is no hope even for them to reconciling to the atrocities that are being perpetrated on them. Even the revoking of Article 35A and 370 could not stop them from whatever struggle that they are undertaking. So I see the situation still, simmering even more, will go even more worst with the passage of time if the international community does not respond and there is a selective morality applied to the region because the Kashmiris happen to be Muslims. So my viewpoint is that I think the international community will have to review its stance. Pakistan has been able to, I think despite the very odds, Pakistan has been able to project diplomatically the issue of Kashmir internationally very well. But as I said in the beginning, that the odds of the geography and the odds of the great power interests, clashing interests in the region have came in the way of getting the fruit of whatever the effort that has been put in by us, as well as the sacrifices, enormous sacrifices in human and material that the Kashmiri people have, made and are continuing to make. So I think while everything will, the effort will continue and the sufferings will continue, and it should continue because there is no other way that we, can. I think Kashmir is very close to the heart and soul of every Pakistani. So that effort and those sacrifices will continue till such time that the international community is woken up, shaken up to give them the right of self-determination as promised to them on the 5th of January 1949.
No, sir. International community should be woken up, should be shaken up. That's what Saad just said. What would shake them, sir? What else do they need to see? I mean, they all know what's going on in Kashmir, sir. They all know the kind of military brutalities that are witnessed on daily or hourly basis, I would say, sir. Winning a cricket match would create a problem for the teachers and for the students, sir, not only in Kashmir, any Kashmiri living in India. And for that matter, sir, I mean, the lives of the Muslims now, they are under extreme threat after what all we are seeing during the last, perhaps, post-2014, let me put it this way, sir. Ever since Narendra Modi took charge, Amit Shah is there, Jaishankar is there, along with Ajit Doval and all these I would say the hawks in the Indian regime, sir. That means that there is going to be no flexibility from the other side, sir. But when it comes to the political support or the moral support, sir, morality doesn't exist in today's world. Political support can only be there if there is a lot of unity within the political parties in Pakistan. That seems to be the missing element. And then you talk about the diplomatic front, sir, where I would say India has really gained over a period of last 10 years or so, sir. Whether you talk about the Middle Eastern countries or you talk about the recent engagement of the Indians with the Western countries, in particular with United States of America, yet keeping Russia very balanced. Still, they recently bought S-400 missile system, looking for S-500 now. And no matter what sort of issues they have in the Far Eastern region, but still they muster a lot of support from that side also. So where is this issue heading then?
No, Faisal, the facts which you narrated, I think that they are correct facts, but your conclusion, I slightly have an alternative view. My alternative view is, no, at the diplomatic front, we are doing well. We are doing very well. Let's start with the strategic issue. On the strategic front, today India has to face really two-front war. Prior to Gulwan, June 2020, India had a fiction with China. This rivalry was a fictitious rivalry. Today it has to. So we are very much in a comfortable position. Even if it can bring S-400 or S-500, Pakistan is very much self-sufficient to defeat these kind of the systems. However, in India, there is a now interesting. Indian armed forces are in a bit confusion. They are working on this integrated theatrical command system, but nowhere they are going. So integrated theatrical command systems, they need to work with the American guidelines, and now they are relying on the Russians. So Russia If selling them weapons, it doesn't make any difference for us. So this is first point. Second is on the Kashmir issue. Recently in the United Nations, Kashmir, we heard the Kashmir issue. We heard at every forum about the Kashmir issue. Now, if we are thinking that the world is only United States and EU, Europe, it is also, you can say, highlighted by the Europeans, by the Americans, that even when there was a Modi had a very good time with the Trump, they were criticizing his Kashmir policy. Even the Americans are criticizing what is happening in Kashmir. So the situation is not as pessimistic, but of course, when you look about India is a big country, economically very big market. But now what is happening in India? They started targeting the Kashmir. They went to the, you can say, chasing the Muslims in India, and now they are chasing the Christians in India. Tomorrow they will be going to chase within the Indian caste system the Dalits in India. So no one.
That has already started.
Yeah, no one in India is, you can say, secure. So if the Hindutva forces or this ultra nationalist forces, of course they can bring unity, they can increase the vote bank, and they can generate a fear of Pakistan as the Chaukidar can get a vote, but it will be strengthening. If you study the Indian societal system, it is no question. Even now, Indian own, you can say, courts are saying there is no secularism. So where India after 75 years standing, saying it's one of the biggest democracy, is one of the fascist democracy. So that is the second point. The third point is, look, freedom movements, or what you call it, liberation movement, they are always succeeded when they have indigenous element. If there is an allegation on us, of course, we are legitimate party or stakeholder of the Kashmir. Since now, and Indians made us when they went to the United Nations Security Council in 1949, 73 years before. But our support could be political, our support could be diplomatic, but this movement is very much by the Kashmiris. Even this new generation of Kashmiris, my understanding is that they are not in our control even. They have their own vision, they are ongoing, and now in order to divert the attention of their own people and to, you can say, undermine or camouflage their failure of their own forces, sometimes they say notion of surgical strike. Now I come to the final point in this context where we are heading. The continuity of the struggle for the right of self-determination in the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir is going to not bring peace in India. It is not going to bring peace between India and Pakistan. Indians' failure in the Kashmir is encouraging them to go against Pakistan, and Indians are now realizing after Pulwama military standoff, and I think journalists will be going to confirm, Pakistan is now out of that 1971, where you can say inferiority phobia. We have defeated them at the air force level, we snubbed them at the what we call it naval side, we have also snubbed them at the army side. So all three forces of Pakistanis were able to check them. Now if they go for once again for a surgical strike, they will receive a bigger response. But where the world will be facing, because we are inch by inch moving towards flashpoint, which we call it nuclear flashpoint. If Americans or their allies, or you can say Indians well-wishers in the Indo-Pacific region, if they do not refrain India and compel or force India to change its policies, they all will be the losers, because war between India and Pakistan, we are not going to start. But our Prime Minister said,
too much on India also, Doctor.
Yeah, but our Prime Minister said that the flag, this false flag could happen. A war between India and Pakistan, and where there are irresponsible regimes or like this kind of the autocratic or religiously dogma kind of the philosophies followers are in power, you can end up like Germany end up into Second World War. Bad news for us, but equally bad news for the entire world.
This could become the Europe of 40s.
Yeah.
If the right appropriate decisions are not taken on time. Coming to you, Dr. Rizwana Sahiba, one important factor, and that is about the human rights issue. Obviously, when we hear that India has done this or India has taken this unilateral decision, obviously they cannot. When you talk to the Americans or the Britishers or other European diplomats here in Islamabad, they always say it's a bilateral issue, should be sorted between these two countries. Obviously, we do believe that the third party is Kashmir, the people living out there. But ma'am, having said that, now the interesting aspect is that Indians have taken unilateral decisions without consulting anyone, not even the Kashmiris, not even the local government out there, not even the Hurriyat leaders or anybody for that matter. They just revoked 370 and they snatched away the special status, and now they can do whatever they want to do. Whether you talk about the demographic changes or about the sale and purchase of the property or business or otherwise. Ma'am, that is going to change the nature of the overall demographic and psychographics, I would say, in the Indian or illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Ma'am, where will it lead then?
Yeah, thank you very much. That is a very significant question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly. Thank you.
I'll go back to my original point that the Kashmir is a question of international law and question of self-determination. When we relate it to the international law, so anything that is initiated in disregard of international law holds no relevance, number one. Number two, yes, internationally, the global patterns have shifted. The global political order has transformed. US is declining, new actors are rising. So in this backdrop, India is playing an anchor and an important role to legitimize the Western-led order in the broader Asian rising order. So in that context, certainly and definitely, India has got that kind of tacit approval and that kind of boosted confidence and mindset to deploy revisionist and hegemonic kind of actions in the particular region. One, and secondly, internally what India is doing that is more, I would say, not only leads to undermine their own secularism, their own liberal democratic so-called values that they have been propagating for last 4 or 5 decades, but it also undermines U.S. global favorable values that they have been protective for so long. Because U.S. alliance system with India not only has legitimized India to take such kind of warmongering action in the region, but also has undermined broader, trust of people of this region with the United States of America. Because this kind of actions of India are also going to create a big dent to the leadership role that U.S. was supposed to, and U.S. We expected U.S. to play in the broader, region. But when question comes to the, understanding the nature of changing patterns of Kashmir conflict, yes, patterns of Kashmir conflict has transformed in a big way. Why? Because their fundamental rights have been denied. And at the same time, the global community, as you rightly pointed out, is very closely watching, on these developments. And India's authoritarian, illegal, unilaterally, moves that they have taken since 5 August 2019 have been globally perceived and have been globally clearly, understood. But India has not only in this backdrop undermined the identity of the Kashmiris, but they have also, undermined the, and stripped their flag, their right of citizenship. They have abrogated their, right of their properties, and they are now targeting their language, and thereby replacing, of course, as you, thereby changing demography and replacing their, languages with new kind of, Hindu languages and so on and so forth. But then the question arises that what is now the solution, and as to how we can attract international community's attention that this, kind of serious crisis situation that is underway in Kashmir. I think, as Dr. Jaspal rightly pointed out, that on diplomatic front, we have been, raising our voice globally but since international order is now transforming and their interests have shifted from Kashmir to Asia Pacific, and now they are probably using India to hedge against China. So in that backdrop, probably they have lost their interest. But at the same time, they should understand that this would lead to create problem for their US-led designed Western order. More significantly, I think I would say the voices of Kashmiris should reach out to the global corridors. So voices of Kashmiris through multiple means and channels, needs to be, raised. And we need to probably somehow create that kind of awareness and build that sort of connectivity through political channels and through other channels, where Kashmiris living abroad and within Kashmir need to, raise their global voice. Secondly, academic literature. Global voice that probably builds global perception is somehow based on academic, authentic, and logical literature. So academic community need to play a role. And Pakistan, through probably their foreign missions, through national, relevant academic institutions such as universities and think tanks, need to build that kind of, global affiliation with, global dominant, I would say, forums, that are probably building global narratives. So until and unless we raise, voice based on the facts, because we academicians hold no, first-hand information. We have no data and no access to, factual data, what is going on in Kashmir. So I think that kind of somehow connectivity with the people of Kashmiris probably living abroad and those who are connected through their, relatives.
I think that is a very important point that you have raised about the Kashmiri diaspora, ma'am, living abroad. I mean, just imagine over 200,000 Sikhs, in fact, became a part of that referendum regarding Khalistan, and that number is unbelievable. Now, General Saab, last quick comment from you. 2 points. Number one, sir, let's talk about the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Since they are under inhuman military siege, sir, and so many war crimes have been committed, totally supported by the administration in Delhi. And don't you think, sir, these issues could be highlighted, could be taken to various forums where at least those people should be given some sort of justification for whatever has been done to them or to their family? One. And secondly, sir, when we talk about the face of the freedom movement, sir, don't you think understanding whatever has happened after 9/11, things have drastically changed. Now that movement should also look like a movement rather than stop giving reasons to countries like India or other pro-Indian states as well, who show them as terrorists. The word T for terrorists. Don't you think, sir, that needs to be taken away and the modern phase should be there, sir? General Saad.
Yes, I think there is definitely a requirement for Pakistan's government to be more proactive diplomatically, especially when it comes to taking the Indian government and the Indian military to the international tribunals on war against humanity and wars against human rights. They definitely need to be taken, and I think Pakistan needs to explore and work on that side as well. And at the same time, I think when we talk of what all that has been happening over the last almost a decade in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, I think one thing we should be grateful to Modi for is that he has, through his own actions, he has really unified us. The people of Pakistan, especially when it comes to our stance on Kashmir, the clarity on Kashmir, of the people across all divides in the country. I am a very frequent visitor to the university students. I am a very frequent visitor to rural youth in my own area. And when I talk to them, interact with them, they have a very clear understanding of what is being hashed against Pakistan, what is being hashed against the armed forces of Pakistan, and what is and how it is being done and by whom it is being done. So I think the people are very clear about the status of Kashmiri people in the Indian occupied Kashmir. They are very clear about where they should stand when it comes to their military. So I think the Pakistani nation itself, especially, is very clearly united on the cause of Kashmir's freedom movement, on the justness of their cause, and at the same time, they also stood with the armed forces when it came to throughout this last 2 decades of war on terror. When Dr. Jaspal has just made a mention of a comparison between the two armed forces, I think we have come a long, long way. We are a very, very battle-hardened army now. Even our young officers are now battle-hardened, what to talk of the senior leadership. So the point is that you just cannot even compare, and that has been proved, I think, over a number of occasions in the last about couple of years of the Indian army or the armed forces getting a bloody nose on whenever they have tried to sort of challenge the Pakistani armed forces. So I think Pakistan need to continue to be diplomatically, politically, and morally proactive by taking the Indian leadership, the Indian government to the international community again and again and again and again. If they have not been able to suppress the freedom struggle with all the might that they have, with all the support of the so-called international powers, today they will not be able to do it anymore, I think, any longer. It seems to be a matter of time, inshallah. But of course, everything comes with sacrifice, and we are all prepared to pay those sacrifices for the country and for Kashmir.
All right, General Khattak, thank you so much for your comments. It was a pleasure having you, Dr. Rizwana, and Dr. Jaspal. Always great to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much for your time, and that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8:05. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.